Welcome to the debate. So imagine knowing you are going to develop type 2 diabetes 3 years from now. Not because of a blood test and not because you feel sick, but literally just because an artificial intelligence system looked at a photograph of the back of your eye.
Right. I mean, it sounds completely like science fiction, but it is happening today. And I think it really highlights how much the practice of medicine is changing. Traditionally, healthcare has been, well, a lot like structural firefighting.
Firefighting?
Yeah, exactly. You wait until the flames are completely visible, a heart attack, a stroke, a palpable tumor, and then you just rush in with everything you have to extinguish the blaze.
Exactly. And by that point, the structural damage is already done. You're just trying to salvage the foundation. It's entirely reactive. But today, because of the unprecedented integration of AI into global healthcare, we aren't just looking at the flames anymore.
Mm-hmm.
We actually have the capability to detect the microscopic friction that sparks the fire years before the first wisp of smoke appears. We're talking about everything from, processing vast oceans of multi-omics data to instantaneously analyzing microscopic pathology slides.
It is a massive paradigm shift. But it forces a really consequential question about where this technology actually serves humanity best. Does the ultimate transformative power of AI in healthcare lie in its capability for long-term predictive foresight, meaning proactively predicting and preventing chronic diseases before they manifest? Or is its true verifiable value rooted in immediate diagnostic democratization, instantaneously accelerating imaging and acute triage, especially in resource-poor settings?
Well, my position is that AI's greatest triumph is its evolution into a predictive guardian, using deep multidimensional data to shift medicine entirely from reactive firefighting to proactive prevention.
And my position is that because predictive models are heavily compromised by data silos and systemic biases, AI's only truly reliable and equitable breakthrough is its immediate superhuman capacity to democratize acute diagnostics.
All right, let's break down the predictive side first, because the sheer scale of what machine learning can now achieve is just staggering. AI has this unparalleled ability to sift through oceans of multidimensional data. We're talking about genomic sequences, wearable biometrics, longitudinal health records, even the composition of our gut microbiome.
Right, the whole multi-omics approach.
Exactly. By analyzing these massive data sets, advanced techniques like deep neural networks can spot really subtle correlations that human clinicians simply cannot discern. We are moving way beyond static risk formulas here.
Okay, but how accurate are those subtle correlations in practice?
Incredibly accurate. Consider a fascinating 2023 study published in The Lancet Digital Health. Google DeepMind developed an algorithm capable of predicting type 2 diabetes up to 3 years in advance.
And this was the study that just used retinal fundus images, right?
Yes, exactly. Just a standard photograph of the retina. Now, for the listener wondering how a picture of your eye tells a computer about your pancreas, the retina is actually the only place in the human body where we can look directly at a live vascular system non-invasively.
Ah, so it's looking at the tiny blood vessels.
Right. The AI is catching microscopic sugar damage to those tiny capillaries years before standard blood tests show elevated A1C levels. It achieved an accuracy metric, an AUC, of 0.91.
Wow, 0.91.
Yeah. In plain English, that means if you put a healthy person and an at-risk person side by side, the AI correctly identifies the at-risk person 91% of the time based solely on those microvascular changes.
I mean, it is undeniably impressive from a technical standpoint, I'll give you that.
It is revolutionary for managing silent epidemics. Take non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, or NAFLD. It affects a quarter of the global population, and most people have no idea they have it until their liver is actually failing. By parsing that multi-omics data, AI can chart longitudinal trajectories and avert these crises long before acute symptoms like cirrhosis ever appear. It intercepts the disease.
That is a very compelling vision of the future. But diagnosing the present saves lives immediately. Predicting the future is inherently fraught with biological noise, whereas decoding acute realities provides a verifiable, instantaneous benefit. When I look at the real revolution here, I look at convolutional neural networks, or CNNs.
The image recognition models.
Yes. Instead of looking at a whole medical image at once and getting completely overwhelmed, A CNN breaks the scan down into tiny overlapping tiles. It scans for specific textures or shapes, like the jagged edge of a malignant tumor or a hairline fracture. And it does this at a speed literally no human can match.
True, the speed is incredible.
We are talking about Google's DeepMind MedPalm 2, dissecting a full-body PET scan for metastatic cancer in 3 seconds. 3 seconds with 94% sensitivity.
Which is dramatically faster than the standard clinical workflow.
It is faster than a human radiologist's 15-minute scan time. And importantly, it removes the human fatigue element. A doctor at the end of a 14-hour shift might miss a shadow. The algorithm just doesn't get tired. Fair point.
But look, the real triumph isn't just speed in a high-end hospital. The real revolution isn't a speculative 3-year prediction for some Silicon Valley executive wearing a fancy smartwatch.
Okay, that's a bit reductive.
It's verifiable triage on the ground. It is portable Butterfly Network ultrasound devices detecting rheumatic heart disease in children in Indian refugee camps in seconds. It is AI like Nanix's AI diagnosing whole slide pathology panoramas for malaria in rural Kenya, a place where there is, only one pathologist per million people. That is the true superpower of AI shattering diagnostic bottlenecks today.
There's an interesting point, though I would definitely frame it differently. To truly evaluate AI's capability, we have to look at the fuel powering these algorithms. You argued that acute diagnostics are the great equalizer, but I would argue that the sheer volume of global multi-omic data is actually creating a predictive oracle that can fundamentally alter the trajectory of global health disparities. The data gives us the map to prevent the disease in the first place.
I come at it from a different way. If we are going to talk about the data fueling these algorithms, we have to be brutally honest about the integrity of that fuel. Predictive models are mathematically fragile if the data is homogeneous. We know for a fact that 95% of sequenced microbiomes in current databases come from Western populations.
Well, yeah, the data skew is a known issue, absolutely.
But it fundamentally compromises the prediction. When you train a model on Western gut biomes, the AI learns what normal looks like for a Westerner. So when early predictive AI models analyzed African diets, they consistently misread the high levels of Prevotella bacteria as a pathology.
A marker for disease, right?
Exactly. But in reality, it wasn't a disease at all. It is just a natural dietary adaptation to fiber-rich foods. The model failed because the training data was scientifically skewed. We saw the exact same thing when early USAI overpredicted risks for certain minority populations.
Right, but...
And furthermore, how can we rely on longitudinal prediction in low and middle income countries when their electronic health records are highly fragmented? I mean, the data silos make predictive accuracy a complete illusion in the very places that need prevention the most.
Okay, I acknowledge those historical limitations. Early AI absolutely struggled with homogeneous data. But if early predictive AI was like looking through a culturally tinted lens, federated learning is the global prism that corrects it.
Wait, for the listeners who might not be deep into data architecture, how does federated learning actually solve the privacy and silo issue?
Great question. Traditionally, to train an AI, you had to move billions of patient records into one massive central server, which is a privacy nightmare, and it directly violates laws like the GDPR in Europe. Federated learning completely flips the script.
How so?
Instead of bringing all the sensitive patient data to the central AI, you send the AI model out to the local hospitals. The algorithm learns from the local data in Kenya, in Brazil, in Singapore. Then, only the learnings, the updated mathematical weights are sent back to the central model. The raw patient data never actually leaves the hospital.
Ah, so it decentralizes the training.
Exactly. Look at the genomic space right now. The Pan-UK Biobank is actively federating with Singapore's SG100K and Brazil's 100,000 Genomes project. They are training AI on 1.5 million genomes globally without ever moving a single sensitive file.
Okay, that does address the privacy concern.
And on top of that, developers are using adversarial training to aggressively test and correct these algorithms for statistical blind spots. Because of this, the South Asian thin fat phenotype, where patients have a low body mass index but dangerously high visceral fat, is no longer being missed by risk models. The algorithm is finally learning the true biological nuances of diverse human metabolisms.
I hear you. But even if federated learning manages to harmonize some of the data variant, we still run into a massive roadblock, which is the reasoning of the AI itself. We are dealing with highly complex, incredibly noisy biological systems. Think about chronic inflammation or nutrition. Can a clinician genuinely trust a machine's logic when it operates as a black box?
You're referring to the inability to see how the AI reached its conclusion.
Exactly. Think of it like a GPS. If your GPS tells you to drive your car into a lake and you can't see the map it's using to make that routing choice, you aren't going to listen to it. Clinicians in Nigeria, for instance, have rightly balked at opaque predictive models that just spit out a risk score without providing any rationale. You cannot prescribe a heavy biologic drug or a radical preventative therapy based on a mathematical black box.
Well,
We saw the sheer peril of this with the 2025 false positive scandal involving a Korean sepsis AI. Doctors relied on a noisy predictive algorithm that couldn't explain its work, and patient care actually suffered.
But that is exactly why the field is moving away from opaque outputs.
But the biological data itself is inherently noisy. Take assay variability. Different laboratories use slightly different chemicals to test blood. A C-reactive protein test in one clinic might yield a slightly different baseline than a clinic across the street, just because of the manufacturer of the reagent. How does a predictive AI separate that mechanical background noise from an actual biological signal of impending disease?
I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective. The whole black box critique is rapidly becoming outdated. Explainable AI is actively dissolving that barrier. We aren't just getting binary risk scores anymore, we're getting the map. In the imaging space, tools like GradCam are being used heavily now.
Oh, the heat map overlays?
Right. It overlays a heat map directly onto the scan. So it literally highlights the pixels in red that made the algorithm suspicious of a pancreatic lesion. The doctor isn't guessing why the AI flagged it. The AI is pointing right at it. But even more impressively, in the predictive space, explainable AI explicitly guides clinicians by stating the features driving the prediction.
Stating them how?
It doesn't just say high risk. It tells a doctor risk elevated because TNF-alpha inflammation markers are up 40%, driven by a specific gut dysbiosis. It provides a verifiable biological mechanism.
So it is tracing the breadcrumbs for the physician.
Precisely. We see this with gradient boosting machines. These are algorithms that build decision trees, one after another, learning from the mistakes of the previous tree. They are successfully fusing static lab results with dynamic wearable data to predict rheumatoid arthritis joint erosions 6 months in advance, with 89% accuracy.
89%?
Yeah. The AI is learning the nonlinear patterns that humans miss, but crucially, it is now communicating how it arrived at that conclusion.
Look, I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that. Let me tell you why. Explaining the mechanism of a prediction 6 months out is scientifically fascinating. I don't deny the technical brilliance of gradient boosting machines, but it operates on an enormous assumption.
Which is?
That there is a functioning healthcare infrastructure in place that can actually act on that prediction.
Well, prevention requires intervention, yes.
But if we want to measure the ultimate value of AI, we must measure its tangible outcome for global populations today. Prevention is a profound luxury when acute diagnostic capacity is entirely absent. In sub-Saharan Africa, there is roughly 1/10 of an MRI machine per million people. By comparison, the U.S. has about 40 per million.
Sure, the resource gap is stark.
If you don't have the radiologist or the pathologist or the imaging hardware to diagnose a stroke or tuberculosis right now, predicting joint erosion 6 months from now doesn't save the patient sitting in front of you.
I think you are heavily underestimating how accessible preventative AI is becoming.
The immediate equalizer is AI that functions in low-resource settings, not preventative forecasting. Let's look at tools like QRAI's QXR platform. It detects tuberculosis on basic, low-resolution X-rays. It doesn't require an advanced imaging center. It's been deployed in 50 Indian district hospitals at 1/10 the cost of traditional diagnostics.
and it boosted case finding by 50%. That is measurable, equitable impact in the present moment. Or look at Visai's platform for stroke care.
The automated triage system.
Yes, it alerts stroke teams to hyperacute bleeds on a brain scan in 1.5 seconds. It cuts the door-to-needle time, the time from when a patient arrives to when they get life-saving medication, by 28 minutes. In a stroke, time is brain. Every minute you wait, millions of neurons die. That 28 minutes is literally the difference between a patient walking out of the hospital and suffering permanent paralysis.
I mean, I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning because you are treating predictive AI as if it's trapped inside a high-end Silicon Valley clinic, which simply isn't true anymore. Predictive AI is already democratizing prevention at a massive population level using ubiquitous consumer technology. You don't need an MRI machine to benefit from foresight,
But you do need continuous data streams.
which billions of people generate every day. Take China, for example, where the prevalence of diabetes is nearing 12%. Tencent's AI is using anonymized WeChat step counts and meal logs to flag prediabetes in millions of people simultaneously. It scales effortlessly because the infrastructure, the smartphone, is already in their pockets. Or look at global malnutrition. The Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition, or GAIN, isn't waiting for children to show up severely malnourished at a clinic.
Okay, how are they applying AI there?
They use predictive models to forecast stunting hotspots in Syrian refugee camps. They integrate satellite crop data, local weather APIs, and supply chain metrics to alert relief organizations before the crisis peaks. They are predicting the nutritional deficit before the biological damage occurs. And clinical nutrition is being personalized globally through Edge AI.
Meaning the processing happens on the device itself rather than sending it to the cloud.
Exactly. We have Edge AI on smartphones analyzing data from cheap, continuous glucose monitors. It can advise a construction worker in Manila to delay his carbohydrates by 20 minutes to avoid a severe glycemic spike. We have graph neural networks mapping the complex interactions of gut bacteria to prescribe polyphenol-rich diets specifically tailored for someone's unique microbiome to reverse irritable bowel syndrome. That is tangible, real-time intervention happening entirely outside the hospital walls.
Come on, that's a compelling argument, but have you considered the scalability of those interventions in truly offline environments? 2.6 billion people globally remain offline. A continuous glucose monitor and a smartphone processing Edge AI still represent a massive barrier to entry.
It's shrinking, though.
Shrinking, sure, but it's still there. I agree that predicting malnutrition via satellite data is an incredible use of macro-level modeling. But once those patients hit the clinic, you still need to know exactly what you are treating.
And I am arguing that AI reduces the number of patients hitting the clinic in the first place.
But sickness is inevitable, and when it strikes, the immediate matching of problem to solution is paramount. Let's look at something as profound as AI-engineered phage cocktails.
For multi-drug-resistant infections.
Exactly. You have patients in Southeast Asian hospitals dying from highly resistant bacteria, like Klebsiella. Traditional antibiotics do nothing. Phages are naturally occurring viruses that hunt and kill bacteria. But finding the exact right virus for a specific bacterial mutation used to take months of trial and error in a lab. A critical patient just doesn't have months.
So how does the AI accelerate that matching process?
It uses reinforcement learning. It analyzes the specific genetic makeup of the patient's infection and instantly matches it against a massive library of phages, predicting which combination will destroy the bacteria. In trials, this acute, immediate matching pushed success rates to 85%. It acts as the ultimate triage and treatment mechanism in the present moment, completely bypassing the need for an agonizingly slow human trial and error process. It finds the exact key to unlock the cure right this second.
But don't you see that the phage cocktail example actually proves my point about multiomics? The AI can only select that specific phage because it has mapped the genetic interactions. It is predicting which phage will suppress the pathogen based on underlying data.
Well,
AI's true triumph is its ability to map these incredibly complex webs, whether it's the 39 trillion microbes in our gut, our metabolic trajectories, or our inflammatory cascades.
By predicting how these systems will behave, we can intercept diseases before they escalate. If we leverage AI merely to read chest x-rays faster, we are certainly improving efficiency, but we are still waiting for the patient to get sick. The ultimate legacy of this technology must rewriting the future of human health so that metabolic and chronic diseases lose their stealth entirely.
Efficiency is far too weak a word for what diagnostic AI achieves. It is not merely faster, it is superhuman in its precision, and it equalizes the interpretive field across the globe. A Syrian refugee's fractured femur in a Jordan camp gets the exact same level of diagnostic expertise as a Silicon Valley executive's brain perfusion scan. It shatters the geographical lottery of healthcare.
I agree it's impactful.
It is. By instantaneously decoding the complexity of the present, AI delivers superhuman triage to the most resource-deprived corners of the world. That is an equitable genius that we can verify today without relying on the assumption that a patient can or will change their lifestyle based on a 5-year prediction.
I think where we fundamentally converge is the understanding that AI, in either capacity, is an indispensable tool that absolutely does not replace human doctors, but rather empowers them. Whether they act as super forecasters projecting years into the future or as acute diagnosticians resolving a crisis in seconds, the human element, the physician's judgment, remains central.
I completely agree. And for either of these visions to succeed safely, we both recognize the absolute necessity of rigorous validation and human oversight. We need inclusive open-source repositories like the MONAI framework,
which provides medical image processing foundations for developers everywhere.
Yes. It invites coders from Nairobi to Nanking to build and validate these tools locally. If the data isn't globally representative and if the tools aren't mathematically robust, both our immediate diagnostics and our long-term predictions will fail the very people they are meant to help. The scientific integrity just must be ironclad.
Precisely. And looking forward, the sheer complexity of global health undeniably requires both. We need that immediate diagnostic clarity to heal the present and the profound multi-omic foresight to protect the future. As we enter the era of 6G wearables, multimodal data fusion, and even quantum-enhanced machine learning simulating metabolic pathways at the atomic scale, the integration of both these capabilities will only deepen. There is so much more to explore in this material.
Absolutely. We are really just scratching the surface of what is scientifically possible.
We leave it to you, our listeners, to draw your own conclusions on where AI's greatest healthcare legacy will ultimately lie. But as we sign off, think back to that burning building we talked about at the beginning. Perhaps the greatest achievement of modern medicine won't just be building a faster, smarter fire engine to rush to the scene. Perhaps it will be the invisible, algorithmic vigilance that ensures the match is never struck in the first place.